I didn't put up new ones for you to watch yet because we were going to do the financial analysis stuff today, and I didn't want to confuse you by giving you a whole bunch of stuff and then not talking about it. So I'll put up the new material probably tonight. If not, it'll be tomorrow. It just depends on how long the video takes to get uploaded. Sometimes YouTube is really nice to me, and sometimes it's not. So do you guys I know obviously Melissa is in the bus, so not so much you, but some of you other folks that have your computers, if a couple of you guys will do me the favor of opening the PDF that goes with this case. I'm going to talk an awful lot, and I can already feel it in my throat. I've been here all day, teaching and having meetings and stuff, so my voice is about to just go. So I'm going to get some of you guys to read the little sections for the industries, and then I can kind of take a little break. And then when we go through, I'll be able to talk more then. So whoever wants to go ahead and unmute yourself. And please tell all of us about the two airlines, airline A and B.
All right, I'll take this one. Companies A and B are airline companies. One firm is a major airline that flies both domestically and internationally. It offers additional services, including travel packages and airplane repair. The company owns a refinery to support its own jet fuel as a hedge to fuel price volatility. In 2008, the company merged with one of the largest airline carriers in the United States. The other company operates primarily in the United States, with some routes in the Caribbean and Latin America. It is a leading low-cost carrier in the United States. One source of operating efficiency is the fact that the company carries only 3 different aircraft in its fleet, making maintenance much simpler than for legacy airlines that may need to service 20 or 30 different aircraft models. This company's growth has been mostly organic. It expands its routes by purchasing new aircraft and the rights to fly into new airports.
All right, so with all of these, we're doing common size. So all of the things like the balance sheet, we're going to divide everything out by the total assets and get a percentage for that. And then when we're looking at income, we're going to divide out by the sales revenue, that top piece, and then get percentage for each going down the income statement. And that's how we're going to be able to compare these two airlines, because one is obviously really big, flies around the world. They have they do cargo. They have their own refinery where they're making fuels, right? So that firm is structured one way, right? And they mentioned, it's a legacy carrier, so it probably has 20 or 30 different airframes that it's doing maintenance on. They mentioned that they offer additional services like travel packages, like for tourists and things like that, and airline repair. So they're probably fixing other airlines' planes as well. It helps them scale out the cost maybe of, taking care of their airframes. I'll do mine and a competitor just so that I don't have to spend as much time retraining or something like that, right? So there's some things there. The other one's really small, only operates in limited areas, has 3 different airframes. And then it says it grows mostly organic. So anytime you hear companies, they talk about growing organically, normally what that means is we're using our retained earnings. We're not trying to expand by, like it says, they purchase new aircraft and the rights to fly into new airports. It's more like they make some more money and then they start calling around and say, hey, we're already servicing Oklahoma City. Maybe we need to expand from Oklahoma City to Denver, right? And we'll probably need 2 aircraft to handle that one. And we'll try to go from Oklahoma City to maybe Albuquerque. And then we'll get a couple of airframes to cover that. So that's what we're saying by growing organically. The other one, it said at in 2008, it merged with one of the largest carriers, right? So that's a very different strategy. This is mergers and acquisitions, where the other one is more like the pizza place that says, hey, I'm doing really well, I should open up a second store on the other side of town, right? That kind of thing. So So that's what we're looking at. So let's be detectives here, right? And I'm gonna scroll down here. So airlines A and B. And if you're what we're looking at is how different are these things? If you notice, these are pretty close, but one thing, I'm going to grab a little highlighter thing here. Is that part, right? The property, plant and equipment, PP&E, right? And if you notice, really low for one and it's high for the other, right? Now, part of that can be the ownership structure. Do I own the airplanes or do I lease the airplanes? Right. That's one of the things that will show up that way. But you also have to remember this is property, plant, and equipment as a percentage of your total assets. Right. And if you're thinking about where their assets are, here's another difference. Right. Goodwill and intangibles. Right. So somebody want to tell me what goodwill is?
Well, since I discussed this with you last week, it occurs after a company buys or merges with another company, and it's really recording the premium that was paid in that acquisition.
Right. And when we had that conversation, I wasn't nearly as nice about it. I said, it's how much you overpaid. Right. So, but that's what it is. That's why we call it goodwill, because you put a bunch of goodwill out into the world because you were writing bigger checks. Right. And so we probably identified who is involved in the recent merger, right? Because that would make sense that they're carrying a lot of assets from that as well. But as far as the property, plant, and equipment piece, well, we already mentioned the leasing, right? So if you think about the one that recently had the merger also has a refinery, right? Which would show up at property, plant, and equipment. So it would make you instinctively think, oh, it's aircraft and a refinery, but we already said we think this one is probably the one that had the recent purchase, right? So that would mean this would probably include that refinery. Right. But that when we're looking at these numbers, even if we know stuff about these companies, you can still see how things can kind of be a little bit ambiguous. So I got to kind of look at some of the other numbers to get a good sense. Doing this common size comparison, it does reveal a lot of things to us, but it also conceals some things, right? Because we're just getting what percentage, and we don't really have a sense of what the scale is. And so but if they're purchasing aircraft and they're leasing aircraft, that could be part of this as well, right? And you'll see a lot of times where airlines will lease aircraft, but they'll do all of the maintenance and that type of thing, because aircraft have very strict regulations on how many hours they can fly in between types of servicing and that kind of thing, right? So so that's kind of what we're looking at there. So let's see. As far as the liabilities and equity, the thing that kind of jumped out to me is like this leverage, right? If you notice, it's 100% of assets, right? And so what is the debt to equity? There's $80 of debt for every $20 of equity, right? Where this one, there's only $63 of debt for every $37 of equity, right? So company A is carrying a lot more debt. Now, part of that could be this recent acquisition, right? So whenever you buy a company, you can do, normally what you do is something known as a leveraged buyout, right? And they call it leverage buyout because you borrow the money necessary to buy out the current owners, right? So you'll come up with some sort of agreement as part of this merger, and you'll say, okay, for every share of stock you surrender, we'll give you 3/5 of a share of our stock or something like that. plus $3, right? Or something like that, something to make people feel that, but both sides are not going to be happy, right? I mean, like, that's kind of what you don't want either side to feel that they just totally won, because it probably wasn't a very fair deal, right? But yeah, so with a leveraged buyout, they have to borrow money. So that's probably what we're seeing here, but it could just be part of their structure, right? Because we've already said that the company that's got its own refinery, they're a global airline, they're just really big, right? I mean, this is a really big company. In fact, I can tell you the names of the companies, right? So so company A, the big one, that's Delta, right? And company B, that's JetBlue, right? So this is us comparing Delta and JetBlue. And if you think about it, if Delta wants to go borrow money, they probably can get that money a lot cheaper, right? Like the cost for them to borrow money is probably going to be a lot cheaper than the cost for JetBlue, because Delta is viewed as being a much more stable company, right? They're larger. They've got all these assets that they can liquidate. The government is much more likely to bail out a company like Delta than a JetBlue. I mean, that kind of thing. So lenders are probably more likely to give them better terms. And so it may make sense for them to carry more debt, right? Just because of their size. But also part of that could be explained, like I said, by the merger, because a lot of times you have to borrow money, to do that, right? So, but yeah, so that's the balance sheet pieces, right? That kind of jumped out. So let's look here at the income statement, right? And so everything here is a percentage of revenue, right? So it starts at 100%. Anytime you see parentheses like this, that's a negative sign. That's a convention from back when we used typewriters. And for those of you that are kind of younger and maybe you didn't use typewriters, sometimes they wouldn't hit really clear, right? When the little things would come up and hit the ink strip, and you'd get partial letters and stuff, and they never wanted you to miss a minus sign because it was a little too faint. And so they started a convention of putting parentheses around it. We also had the convention of using red, but red ink is more expensive. So they decided just to use black and then use parentheses to say negative. So anytime you see those, that's where we're subtracting stuff off, right? So it starts at 100%, and then we subtract 70, and so we're left with 30. We subtract 4, 5, and 5, we're left with 16. And then we get all the way down, and our net income is 11, right? So both of these have the same profitability, right? Net income over revenue, right? They're both bringing in the same net income from their revenue. Where was that? Right here. Well, it's a little bit different. One of them's 11.1, the other one's 10.6, right? But they both round to 11 right here, right? So that's how profitable they are. They're about the same, right? Even though one is a great big company and the other one's a much smaller, but still a good sized company. It's an airline. But they have the same amount. But when you look at this difference here, this cost of goods sold is pretty big, right? So if you look at this gross profit, right, it's like, goodness, if company B could control whatever this other operating expense is, they would be killing it, right? They would have so much more profitability. Now, we don't know exactly what all goes into that, the cost of goods sold at the top. I mean, obviously fuel and things like that are part of it. And we don't know what other operating expense is. And so I can't really say exactly what it is that they need to change here, but that's probably where there's a potential to increase profitability, is trying to figure out what that is and make that go away. Already had highlighted that one accidentally already, but as you see, their dividend payout is 0. That fits that organic growth, right? They don't pay dividends. They just say, we'll keep the money. We don't go borrow a lot of money. We're JetBlue. It's hard for us to get money at really good rates. So what we'll do is we'll retain earnings, not pay out dividends. And then when we get an opportunity to expand that, flight plan, into Chicago, we can do that. Right. Or whatever. They're using that to get that flexibility. Right. So excuse me. Okay. So if you notice, these turnover numbers are pretty different, right? So do you guys remember what turnover is? Somebody want to shout that out?
Inventory turnover be how many times they're turning through their inventory in a year?
In a year. Right. So the higher the number, the faster you go through it. Does that make sense? It's like you would have, if you take 365 and divide by that, that'll tell you how many days until they turn over all of their inventory, right? Now, what is inventory for an airline? Right? Now, I mean, it sounds like, well, I mean, it's not really the seats, because if they don't sell the seat on this flight, they don't get an extra seat on the next one, right? So what is inventory if you're an airline? Normally that means things like repair parts, right? So when we're saying inventory, it's like for our maintenance equipment, right? And we already said that B, that's the JetBlue, right? They only have 3 different airframes. So they only need 3 of those funky shaped gaskets, right? Where company A's got 30 different aircraft, right? So they're going to have to carry that much more of this inventory, right? So, and they also, just being larger, they probably have repair facilities spread out to a lot more cities, right? At least 2 or 3 of their hubs will probably have repair facilities. So you don't have to bring a damaged aircraft all the way back just for, that type of work. So I know Delta, at least, they used to have about 7, but I think they've cut those back now. But so that's probably what we're seeing there. With inventory turnover. Although one of the weird things too is the fact that Delta owns their own refinery, right? So I don't know, some of that inventory for Delta could be big tanks of crude oil, and they're just kind of sitting on it, and they're not going to refine until crude oil spikes up, because they only use that to offset it's a hedge for fuel price increases, right? So they can store their own fuel, run the refinery, sell off all the like gasoline, stuff like that they don't need, right? And then the kerosene, that's what the jets use. They let the rest of the oil stack pay for it, right? So so it could be some of that kind of stuff too. I don't really know. And then if you notice, receivables turnover is very different, right? Much lower for B than for A. Right now, when you think about receivables turnover, this would be the same thing. 365 divided by that would tell you how many days it takes to get all their receivables in, right? For it to cycle through. So, if you look, airline A, that's like almost a month, right? 12 would be a month, right? So it's, maybe 3 weeks, something like that. And then the other one's about half that time, right? But then what's receivables for an airline, right? How much credit do you extend as an airline? Normally your passengers are going to pay at the time they take the flight, right? They would have paid before that, actually, right? They oftentimes even months ahead of time, right? So that's why you're not seeing nearly as much in receivables for B, because most of their business is just airline flights. But we already said, A, they have all these other businesses, right? Ancillary things like the travel business, right? And some of that could be, sort of on account. They also do cargo, and you almost never pay for cargo early, right? Unless you're one of us, like doing retail and buying something from Amazon, or something. But other than that, shipping gets paid later, right? And so it'll roll for like 30 days or something, and then they pay it off. And that's kind of what you're seeing with that receivables turnover, is probably a lot of like cargo type stuff that's getting paid off over time, right? This was a little unusual at first to me, that fixed assets turnover. And again, it's the same thing, how long does it take to basically pay for these fixed assets? But you have to remember with airline A, we had fixed assets showed up as being really small relative to the other firm because of all that goodwill, right? And so it may be inflating that a little bit and making it look like, oh, wow, they're really good at using those airplanes. And it's like, well, yeah, because they're carrying so many assets as goodwill, right? So, I mean, it's like they're showing their balance sheet maybe looks a little different than the other one. And that's what you're seeing reflected there. So, okay, so like right here, you know, debt to equity, it's obviously much higher with that when we went over that one ahead of time. So here's something that is also pretty interesting, right? If you look, the net profit margin is about the same. Remember we said it was about 11%, right? 11.1 and 10.6. Asset turnover is the same, right? Or really close to it, 0.759 and 0.777, you know? So about the same, but look at that difference in the return on equity. Right, that gets into that DuPont formula, right? Net profit times asset turnover times my equity multiplier, right? 1 plus debt over equity, right? And so once I have, and I multiply times that, and then I get that return on equity, right? So even though profitability looks, you know, similar and asset turnover looks similar, the fact that airline A is so leveraged means that the return on equity is much higher. All right, so you guys feeling like detectives now? Right, so that's what that's exactly what we do though when we're going to do these cases and we're looking at these companies. You're just trying to see what's weird, right? And you know, I used to watch you know, the old Batman TV show, and Batman, he would just notice something and he'd be like, oh look, there was that you know, the horse's mane was braided this particular way, and that's like this particular you know, warrior tribe in the Arabian desert. And you know, he would piece together all these things by looking at these little breadcrumbs. And that's kind of what we're doing with these. You know, we're trying to see, okay, what's out of place, what looks weird, and then we're able to, you know, sort of tell a story as to what's happening. So would somebody be so kind as to read the beer section, company C and D?
Yep, I got this. I love talking about beer. So, of the beer companies, C and D, one is a national brewer of mass market consumer beers sold under a variety of brand names. This company operates an extensive network of breweries and distribution systems. The firm also owns a number of beer-related businesses, such as snack food and aluminum container manufacturing companies, and several major theme parks. Over the past 12 years, it has acquired several large brewers from around the globe. The other company is a large craft brewer in the United States. Like most craft brewers, this company produces higher quality beers than the mass market brands, but production is at a lower volume and the beers carry premium prices. The firm is financially conservative.
All right, so anybody have any guesses at what these companies may be? What's the beer company that owns amusement parks?
It has to be Busch.
What I was thinking.
Do you know who owns Busch?
Budweiser?
Well,
Anheuser.
Anheuser-Busch, right? And so Budweiser is part of that, Stella Artois, Michelob. I don't know, they got a bunch of them though, right? So that's what they're saying with these globals. They even have like Brahma, which is an Indian beer. So like they are a global beer company in that sense, where they've gone out and purchased Stella Artois, I think is Belgian. So they acquired beers that way. Anybody want to guess at who the craft beer company is? Sam Adams, right? So that's the largest craft brewery in the United States, right? And so not nearly as many production facilities, not nearly as many lines that they carry. But that's what we're looking at, right? So these, and in fact, Sam Adams they do like those seasonal beers, right? Where they'll come out with one for a few months, you know, that one for like Oktoberfest and one around Christmas and things like that. So that's kind of how they've differentiated their beer market, right? So but the other thing was you said, hey, this is a much more conservative company, right? And what does conservative mean in business? It means they're probably holding on to a lot of cash and cash equivalents, and that's kind of what we're seeing right here. Right? 40% is in short term. Right? This is a company that's, I don't know if management got into a bad situation early in their careers and now they're like, we're never getting caught behind the 8 ball again, you know. But they're carrying 40% in cash and other short-term you know, assets, right? So this is a company that can pay off debt, you know, quickly if something were to happen, right? So when you say the firm is financially conservative, that's what that means, right? And you can really see it jump out there. They tend to carry a bit more in receivables, and if you notice, they're carrying a lot more in inventory.
Hey, Dr. Woodruff,
Yeah.
you're talking
Oh,
about the computer companies.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here telling the wrong story. Not that what I said is not true, but yeah, okay, so that's true. Okay. Well, I think we've already noticed some things for the next case too then. But yeah, same thing. This one's also going to be more fiscally conservative, it looks like. But yeah, so when you see that, when you look at that current assets, right, they just have a lot more in current assets. That's what that being so fiscally conservative means. But also look at this goodwill, right? But that's because they've been going out and buying up brewers from around the world, right? They've got European, Asian, African, you know, South American brewers that they've gone out and purchased because it's easier just to buy a successful company than to try to convince somebody in Germany to drink Budweiser. Right? I'll just go to Europe and I'll buy an existing brand that they've had for 300 years and then they'll just not know. Right? So that's kind of been their attitude towards this, and you see that, you know, really jump out. So let's see. Net PP&E is also a bit different, right? When you see that, I mean, this one is showing up as goodwill. Company D has a lot more PP&E. So I don't know exactly what's causing that. I don't know if they have excess capacity because they basically run 40 giant micro brews in their, you know, saying like if it's like there's a lot of duplication and that causes it to be more expensive than it otherwise would be. I'm not really sure. You know, other than that's just how they've structured their company, right? I mean, I don't have any particular insight, you know, there, but yeah, so long-term debt, again, this is a company that I don't know the story. Now that I'm talking to you guys about it, I kind of want to go look it up and see if there's a near bankruptcy or a different company maybe failed or something, because again, no long-term debt, right? Do you guys know of any other companies that don't take out debt? Would you be surprised to hear a couple? So one is Chick-fil-A and another one is Hobby Lobby. So Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A, they don't do debt. They also are both not open on Sunday. It's not a coincidence, right? So it's part of like the particular like Christian philosophy that they have, right? So they're very big. There's a proverb, neither a bar or the debtor is slave to the lender. And I think they've just really taken that to heart. So they're like, I'm not going into debt, right? But you'll see other companies sometimes do it, at least with long-term debt. But they will have some, like this is like some short-term stuff. They're okay with, like a rotating line of credit kind of thing, but they don't have bonds outstanding or anything like that, which again, wow, that's pretty conservative, right? So let's see, a couple of other things to look at. Like the current ratio, right? So 0.64 means if something happened, they would have 64%, right, of what they would need in current assets to cover current liabilities. Where Sam Adams has $2 for every dollar they owe, right? Like, again, this is that's what I'm saying. Like, I really want to look a little bit into their background, their quick ratio. That's when you pull out, like the inventory and things like that, and you're looking just at like the cash and short term. And again, you notice the other one falls down to 40%. They're still over 100%. So again, this is a company where I don't. COVID did not affect them the same way, obviously, because they could still ship beer. And one of the things I know we did here in Kentucky was allow for restaurants to deliver margaritas and stuff like that, because that helped, because they could at least get their liquor sales and things like that. But if you think about those kinds of shocks, and companies still have to make payroll or, things like that, this is a company that, they're gonna cover payroll checks, right, and that kind of thing. They're not going to have those kinds of issues, right? Which again, just them being a conservative company, shows that. So as far as like the debt to equity, I mean, so again, they don't take out a lot of debt, right? And they definitely don't take out long-term debt. So there is some little bit of long-term debt. It's not a zero, but it's extremely low, right? There. And excuse me. So we have, let's see, what else were we going to talk about? Even though they don't have debt, like the same way, the debt multiplier there, return on equity is higher. Remember, I said that you would multiply the net profit margin times the asset turnover. That gives you a return on assets. Then you multiply it by that multiplier, and that's what gives you the return on equity instead of just return on assets. And so that's because their asset turnover is so high, they're so good at utilizing their assets, right? Even though they're holding a lot of cash, they're still able to generate a lot of income off of the assets that they have, right? Even though it seemed, that they had a lot of PP&E, they're turning it into money, right? Which is good. That's what you want, that. But it also had mentioned that they sell at a higher margin, right? And so it may be, hey, we have a lot more expensive PP&E and we've got all this extra stuff, but people are willing to pay for it, right? So it's not a bad business decision. And if you see this return on equity, it's not, right? A dollar invested here, gets you 19 cents, and a dollar invested here gets you 21 cents, right? So even though they're a much smaller company, they operate differently, you can still see like a similar return as an investor. So, all right. Any questions on that one? I'm sorry I jumped ahead and I started highlighting stuff in computers. Could somebody go ahead and just read that part real quick?
Yeah, I got it. Companies E and F sell computers and related equipment. One company sells high-performance computing systems, supercomputers, to government agencies, universities, and commercial businesses. It has experienced considerable growth due to an increased customer base. The company is financially conservative. The other company sells personal computers as well as handheld devices and software. The firm has been able to differentiate itself by using its own operating systems for its computers and by creating new and innovative designs for all its products. These products carry premium prices domestically and globally. The company follows a vertical integration strategy, starting with owning chip manufacturers and ending with owning its own retail stores.
Okay, so I'm guessing you guys can guess who that second one is, right? The computer company with their own operating system, their own retail stores, their own cult following, right? You know, I'm kidding for those of you that maybe have these products. But I don't know if you guys recognize the first one. Anybody know any supercomputer manufacturers? I know some of you guys are kind of into blockchain. Maybe you know some.
Is it Dell? I don't know though.
It's Cray.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, Cray supercomputers. So Cray, their bread and butter are government contracts, right? And that makes you a very fiscally conservative company because you know what? I signed that 4-year deal and I know it's going to get renewed, and I'm probably doing this for the next 25 years because the Department of Energy doesn't want to go to anybody else, right? Like think about EKU, right? Because we're a government agency and we don't have one of these, but I don't know that the UK has one either. But you know, you can imagine, you know, a place like UK, they got a medical research hospital, you know, all that kind of stuff. They're not going to change this computer, right? You know what I'm saying? So this is one of those types of companies where Cray basically has a very narrow defined market, right? Like Apple, you know, you can see little kids using iPhones, you know, and iPads. You can see company executives doing things with iPhones. You can see people shooting movies with iPhones, right? So there's a lot of different types of markets for that product, and the product iPhone maybe is different than who buys the laptop, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lot more differentiation. Although Apple has sort of built this a premium brand, right? In that people are willing to pay you know, additional money because it's Apple. Cray is more we're just one of the few companies that can build one of these things, right? And by the way, if you ever go back and watch the old Jurassic Park, the first one, that's one of the things they mentioned in there is that this facility has multiple Crays. You know, they're talking about the computer system because that was just like so unheard of that you would have more than one supercomputer to run something. And now I think we have lots of companies that do that. But there's a lot more profit margin because once it's up and running, it's all about just keeping it stable, right? And so there's just a lot of that built in. So let me scroll back to the top of this one. Are these colors showing up okay? I'm trying to get something that you can still see the numbers through, but I kind of want it to pop. But I've already sort of mentioned, you know, these things again, right? And so again, this shows, you know, kind of is our big clue that, okay, F is probably Cray, right? They're going to be that more, you know, fiscally conservative firm. And then if you look at, again, current assets, right? And then right here, long-term marketable securities. That's Apple stuff. Like Apple as a company had so much money, they didn't know what to do with it. So they just started buying long-term marketable securities in the market, right? Because they had to do something with all these assets, right? Apple as a global firm is in a situation where they have a lot of assets that are stranded outside of the United States. And so if we call it repatriation. So they bring that money back to the United States. If they repatriate that money, they have to pay taxes on it. That's one reason why a lot of companies have a lot of money that just sits offshore. But they need to turn it into more money because they're a company, right? And they're not supposed to just sit on money. They're supposed to go and make more money with it. That's why the managers have their jobs, right? the principal agent problem, right? You're supposed to go on my behalf and go make me money. And so what you see there is them having all of those investments, and it was just a way for them to park some of that money. But yeah, that just kind of looks a little unusual, but it makes sense given their unique situation. Let's see. Let's see. Not a lot of debt. This is again fiscally conservative. So you say they have a lot more shareholder equity than debt. Again, it just puts them in that type of a situation where they're able to respond if something were to change. I'll make sure I don't get my lines all mixed up here. Let's see, there's gross profit and then net income, right? So when you're just looking, right, at selling stuff, right, it looks like, hey, it's about the same, right? But then when you start looking down here, right, well, what's this difference? Well, that R&D is a pretty big piece, right? They build supercomputers. And it's not to say that Apple doesn't spend a lot of money on R&D, but Apple's R&D tends to be things like, hey, how can we improve this camera? How can we improve this screen resolution? Those, and I say that's not difficult, but when you have like supercomputers and you're like, I need this processing speed to go down by 20 microseconds or something, or nanoseconds probably, but it's like I can't do this without huge investments in equipment to do this kind of research. And so you're seeing sales expense and R&D expense are both much higher. Apple, even though they've got the stores and things like that, Apple has that brand, right? Where when I asked you guys about supercomputers, it was like, ooh, I don't know, because you just don't know these aren't household names that we normally talk about, right? So again, that's a little unusual there as well. But yeah, you're seeing that big difference in this profitability, right? That net income piece, right? As far as inventory turnover, right? The one with retail operations turns over much faster, right? And so Apple is turning over about every 6 days, right? So it's like they make it, they receive it, and they put it out. Well, they don't actually make, they have it made, they receive it, and then they put it out the door. And so you're seeing, and then receivables are also collecting much faster, right? But then this other one, I mean, these are government contracts, right? And it tends to be a different type of business when you're doing that. And then as far as fixed asset turnover, right? They don't have stores. They don't have those types of assets that are probably going to sit idle somewhat, right? And so because of that, their turnover is going to look a bit better. And then let's look at anything else. Well, and also they don't pay a dividend either, right? So the last couple of ones we've had where somebody did not pay a dividend, and so they're not paying a dividend either. Again, all of their money is being used that way. All right, so let's look at the hospitality one. Someone want to read that one for me?
Yeah, I can do it. Companies G and H are both in the hospitality business. One company operates hotels and residential complexes. Rather than owning the hotels, this firm chooses to manage or franchise its hotels. The company receives its revenues each month based on long-term contracts with the hotel owners, who pay a percentage of the hotel revenues as a management fee or franchise fee. Much of this company's growth is inorganic. The company buys the rights to manage existing hotel chains and also the rights to use the hotel's brand name. This company has also pursued a strategy of repurchasing a significant percentage of the shares of its own common stock. The other company owns and operates several chains of upscale full-service hotels and resorts. The firm's strategy is to maintain market presence by owning all of its properties, which contributes to the high recognition of its industry-leading brands.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the two companies, I'll just go ahead and tell you. The first one is Hyatt, right? And so Hyatt runs Hyatt, right? There also is like Park Hyatt and Hyatt Regency, because they have like a resort style, and then like a business traveler, and then just a regular hotel. But they're all Hyatt, right? The other one is Marriott. And so Marriott, they have Marriott Courtyard, Residence Inn, Spring Hill Suites, Fairfield, they have the Ritz-Carlton, right? So they have, you know, the really, really expensive, and they've got the really, really cheap, and they've got probably a hotel at about every price point in between, right? And so this is like Procter & Gamble's strategy. So Procter & Gamble makes Tide. That's the #1 selling detergent. They also make Gain. That's the #2 selling detergent, right? And so at some point, Procter & Gamble said, look, yeah, we can have the best selling product, but somebody's always going to be the second best selling. Why don't we just make that one too? And so that's what they do. And then, in fact, in a lot of the things that they manufacture, and it's not unique to them, Unilever does it, you know, and everything as well. You'll have multiple lines with different price points, right? Because what you're trying to do is capture this market and that market and that market, and you can differentiate them on price. And that's what Marriott has done. They've got places where you can stay and it's like 50, 60 bucks a night. And they got places you can stay where it's $1,000 a night, right? And they're very happy to service both of those types of customers because they just want to make money off all their assets, right? But they have bought up different hotels, right? That's how they've grown. And some places they own and manage, and some places are franchisees, right? That's another difference, because some with the Hyatt, they're all owned by Hyatt. But with Marriott, some of them are franchisees. I'll go back to yellow here. So like property, plant, and equipment. Right, you see a big difference there, right? And you might say, well, wait, how are they a hotel and this isn't, you know, a bunch of hotels? And it's like, well, some of them are franchisees, right? And it won't show up on their balance sheet because it's somebody that's paying them a franchisee fee, right, every month to keep, you know, that the signage up, right, and all of that stuff, right? And the franchisee has rules that they have to follow, you know, as part of that franchise agreement. The other thing that takes up a lot of their assets is that goodwill. Like I said, they've been doing mergers and acquisitions, right? And so what you're seeing is, you know, this goodwill showing up because they've been buying out all those other brands. Right? As far as the equity, debt to equity piece, look at this. That's pretty wild, isn't it? They show negative equity, right? So have you guys ever seen anything that would make you think that you can do that? Sounds broken, doesn't it? That so how can that happen? If this is where book value and market value being different can really throw off your numbers, right? And so what happened is there was a share repurchase program, right? So the company was going back and buying back shares of stock, right? They were basically saying the share price is too low. If this is what they're selling for in the market, that's ridiculous. We'll buy them, right? And so they were out there purchasing these shares, and you have to report that, right? Because they're buying shares of their own company, right? And so they're showing up. That's one of their liabilities are showing up so high because they got to have this contra account to balance this shares account, for everything to work out. And because of their repurchase, the value of the shares shot up, which caused that balance to get really thrown out, right? So this is one of those things where it's like, well, we really can't trust this too much, right? Because this is like a weird thing that happens with the market, and we're getting market and book values mixed together, right? And we know book value, that's like a historic thing, I bought this equipment for this much, that kind of thing. And then we start buying equities and we're getting market prices thrown in there, right? So that's more of a, hey, this is really kind of weird. So, yeah. Let's see. Oh, the other thing here, like the receivables. That could possibly be, because of the assets, because so much of that is like franchise assets and things like that. It could show up like that. So I'm trying to think how it works. I think it's like the franchisee so if you own a Marriott will train the employees for you, right? So that they are qualified to work there, right? And then they will bill the franchisee to pay them back for that training. Does that make sense? It's almost like McDonald's doesn't do this, but you could imagine, like McDonald's Academy, and it's like, yeah, send your top shift workers to us and we'll teach them how to like be shift managers or whatever, and they'll be great. And they'll go back to you, and then they'll just send you a bill for their education, right? Marriott does do this kind of thing where they'll provide training. Now, a lot of it is probably online in-house training, kind of thing, but they provide all that for them, and they just bill that back to the franchisee, which will show up as this receivable. Right? Does that make sense? So when you have franchise agreements, so there'll be receivables there a lot of times just associated with that agreement. Right? That's what I was trying to think about how to formulate, right? So it's not so much that they're extending all this credit, like people are getting hotel rooms, and then that's, once a month they make a payment or something like that. This is probably one of those things where they have all these franchise agreements and they bill the franchisee for certain things, right? And then that sits as a receivable until they get paid back. So yeah, so that's what that piece looks at. Let's see. Let's look at like the income stuff. You see the net income differences, right? Hospitality or not the Hyatt, the Marriott, right? You see their net income is much higher. Right. Well, they don't have nearly the costs associated up front because they don't run that. That's somebody else's up front, right? That's the franchisee, right? The guy out there that's running the Marriott right off the freeway, right? He's the one that's covering a lot of that kind of stuff. So since most of my stuff is through franchise, I do have costs, but those costs are going to be with the ones that I own, the ones that I manage, right? Not the ones that I've just rented the name out to someone else, right? And in fact, over here, you see depreciation and amortization is probably depreciating those hotels. And, the Marriott doesn't hold nearly as much, as far as they don't own, as many hotels, right? Let's see. Some of the turnover stuff. Well, okay, so NMF, not a meaningful figure. So is it, do they not have inventory? Is that what it is? Yeah. Where there is just a little bit of something being carried, right? Because they own all those properties. With us, they're not carrying it, so we can't even talk about things like inventory turnover. But just understand that can happen, right? This other one, we have a number, but that's like, every 3 days. It's almost like, okay, is inventory counting the little bars of soap, right, that we're going to put on the cart? Is that what this is including? And then we're going through them, pretty fast. I maybe, so, okay, well, let's go ahead and skip ahead. Let's do the newspaper. Somebody want to read that one?
I can. Let me pull it back up here. Shoot, I lost it. I say I can, but I've just lost it. Oh,
I can get it.
yeah, I'll get the next one. Let me just pull it back up.
Okay, newspapers, companies I and J are newspapers company. One company owns and operates 2 newspapers in the southwestern United States. Due to the transition of customer preference from print to digital, the company has begun offering marketing and digital advertising services and acquiring firms in more profitable industries. The company has introduced cost controls to address cost structure issues such as personnel expenses. Founded in 1951, the other company is renowned for its highly circulated newspaper offered both in print and online formats. This paper is sold and distributed domestically as well as around the world. Because the company is focused largely on one product, has strong central controls that have allowed it to remain profitable despite the fierce competition for subscribers and advertising revenues.
All right, so one of these companies, I'll tell you now, it's the New York Times, right? And so obviously it's a print paper, it's been around, for a long time. The other one is a company called A.H. Bello. It's a small company out of Dallas, and they have a couple of newspapers, right? Two different papers in print. So, but both of them are newspaper companies. And as we know, this is an industry that has suffered ever since the rise of the internet, right? People have not wanted to get online, or they want to get their news online, not in print, right? So we've seen that happen. Both of these companies, as you can see, let me go with a slightly different color. Right, they both have pretty high cash and short-term investments, right? Which, it could be, hey, we're newspapers, we know we're going to need to be able to put, have the cash available to pay for things, right? It could also, it's like a natural hedge, I guess is the way to think about that. As far as the goodwill piece, right? You're seeing, where there's, one of these companies The company has begun offering marketing and digital advertising services and acquiring firms in more profitable industries, right? So obviously they've been purchasing other companies, right? And so that's why you're seeing that goodwill, go up. Let's see, is the equity piece, right? You see here, it's about $2 of debt for every dollar of equity. And then the other one, it's about 50-50 with a bit more equity than debt. In this particular case, since we know one of these is a really large company, the other one is like a regional company, then that would probably be an indication, hey, this regional company, they tend to be a bit more conservative, so they'll have more equity. They also may not have as much access to low cost debt, right? Because they're so much smaller. And so because of that, you can do that makes sense under that as well. Let's see. One of them's not making a profit, right off the bat, right? If you notice that the gross profit, the cost to produce this paper is more than they make by selling the paper, right? That's generally not a good thing, right? That probably means they're, it's not going to be something like the cost of their paper probably, but it could easily be like cost of labor. That's one reason why you hear so much about, newsrooms having all these layoffs and everything, because, you're seeing how these costs can be, right? So obviously they end up not turning a profit either at the end of this. Let's see. There is no sales expense for the one that wasn't turning a profit. But there's a rather higher sales expense, for company I. So yeah, I don't know why they show no sales expense, unless they cannot pull out how much is sales out of their cost of goods sold. Right. I mean, that just seems weird. You would expect it to be some number because they don't have paper boys delivering these papers, or they're not, paying to place these papers somewhere. Like, I don't know why that is zero exactly, right? But yeah. And then, like, let's see. Even like the fixed assets are about the same. So these other assets is I don't know if that maybe is the headquarters building or something, right? Because it's right there in New York City. Maybe it shows a lot of value, right? Because of the building. I mean, because they're literally on Times Square, right? That's how Times Square got its name. So maybe it's showing that, but yeah, so that's the newspapers. And again, we're getting negative returns on equity because they're not making money, right? They're losing money. And so that's why you're seeing that negative profit margin, which gives them a negative return on their equity. So, and they probably don't have a dividend. No, if you see, like right here, it shows a negative dividend. So this is another one of those things, like, how in the heck does that work? Well, remember, they lost money, right? So their profit was negative, right? So if I pay out a positive amount of money, so if I make $100 and I pay out 30, my dividend payout is 30, right? 30%, right? If I lost $100 and I paid out 30, then it would be a negative 30, right? You see what I'm saying? Because of the sign being different. So this right here is they paid a dividend and they had no profit to cover it. So they paid a dividend with negative profit. So it shows up as a negative dividend. It wasn't that they called them up and said, hey, give us back some money. It was because they had a negative net income. So why would you pay a dividend if you didn't make any money? Like, why would you do that?
To show you still like value the shareholders.
It is a market signal, right? Hey guys, don't worry, right? This was a one-time thing. We're going to turn this around, right? Don't let this get you down, right? I know we got, athletes here, right? You guys heard the coaches say stuff and you're just like, all right, coach, I know what you're saying, but it's not true, but but what I'm saying, like sometimes they'll just say, hey man, we're okay. It's going to be all right. And you look at the scoreboard and you're like, all right, but this is a way for a company to do that. They're like, yeah, okay, everything's bad and we're negative, but hey, I'm writing you a check. So I must believe it's true. Right. And so that's what they're doing. Is they're just trying to signal to the shareholder, hey, this company is going to be okay. We're not even going to miss your dividend payment. This is just a hiccup. We'll be all right. Sometimes that's true, right? And they're able to turn things around and everything ends up being better off. Sometimes it's not, right? And then the company just kind of gets into this downward spiral, right? But that's another one of those things when you're looking at these, oftentimes stuff like that is just like a little flag. Hey, look more into this, right? Now with these, all the companies, it's like a little 3 or 4 sentence paragraph, right? And with the other cases, obviously the cases are going to be much longer. And so there's a little bit more for you to dig through and to kind of piece out what exactly is because of this policy. And maybe this part can be explained, but not all of this, right? And that kind of thing. So that's what you're trying to do is, look for all the little threads, right, that connect that. So, but yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. You're just trying to send a signal. So could somebody do me the huge favor and read the pharmaceuticals?
I can do it this time, Dr. Woodruff. Companies K and L manufacture and market pharmaceuticals. One firm is a diversified company that sells both human pharmaceuticals as well as health products for animals. This company's strategy is to stay ahead of the competition by investing in the discovery and development of new and innovative drugs. The other company focuses on generic pharmaceuticals and medical devices. Most of this company's growth has been inorganic. The growth strategy has been to engage in highly leveraged acquisitions, and it has participated in more than 100 during the past 8 years. The goal of acquiring new businesses is to enhance the value of the proven drugs in the company's portfolio rather than gamble on discoveries of new drugs for the future.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. Okay, so the first company, K, this is Valiant. And so they make pharmaceuticals and they make medical devices as well. And then L is Eli Lilly. You may have heard of them. So they make Prozac, Cymbalta, so a lot of the drugs that you've heard of, they make, and they also make like home healthcare kind of products that you would see at a pharmacist, right? So so when you look here, we've been kind of jumping into that one a lot, but the goodwill and intangibles, both of them, have that. Part of that will be the value of their patents, because they both are pharmaceutical companies. But you know, the Valiant, you know, has been very active in acquisition, so they have a good bit more. And that's just growing by acquiring firms, where Eli Lilly is just a long time firm, right? They've grown that way over time. Again, when you see a lot of acquisitions, a lot of times you'll see a lot of debt. And so if we look here at like long-term debt, right? So it looks like maybe some of those buyouts were leveraged buyouts, right? They took on debt to be able to acquire more. We expect R&D probably will be higher, right? So Eli Lilly spends a lot more on R&D. So that's because they're trying to make new drugs. They make, you know, Cymbalta, they make Cialis, they make, you know, they make all sorts of drugs, you know, they make insulin, right, for diabetics. So they're always researching new ones, where company K seems to be more of, yeah, we'll make new drugs, but we're more likely to just go buy a company and get the drug that way, right? Why go through all the trouble of doing all the research and all of that? We'll just wait until it's right, you know, it's going before FDA, and then we'll go and make an offer then and say, hey, if this goes through and the FDA approves it, we'll purchase your company for this much per share. You know, they'll work out all the deals. And then if it doesn't work out, then they can walk away. And if it works out, they just buy the company. So they don't have to do their own R&D. They just buy the work that other people are doing, right? So that's kind of what we're seeing here. Eli Lilly, they're not going out and acquiring firms like that. Not to say they wouldn't buy a company, but that's not their strategy for growth. They try to develop their own drugs in-house. They have their own R&D departments, you know, for that, right? So yeah, there's that piece. As far as net income, again, you see one company has lost money, right? The smaller firm did. Eli Lilly, you know, made money. And where's their costs? Right here, this other operating expenses is hurting them. And net interest, right? So let me just highlight those. Right? Now the net interest expense is because they're carrying all that debt, right? Remember we said, look at all this long-term debt because they've been buying out these companies. Well, they got to pay that money back, right? And so that's really eating into their profitability, because that's, if you added that 15% back, they'd be at 12, just like Eli Lilly, right? And then the other piece is this other operating expense. I'm not sure what that is. It just says this other expense. You know, I'm not sure why that is so high, unless that has something to do with, like, you know, because they make like medical equipment and things like that. So I don't know if it's maybe something to do with that, but those just kind of jump out and say this is kind of weird, right? And then let's look down at some of these other ones. Long-term debt to equity. So this isn't debt to equity, right? Which is the 87 and 59, but long-term debt to equity. Look at that. 500 times. I mean, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever heard the phrase leveraged out to their eyeballs, but that's pretty much what that means, right? They, given the size of, you know, the shareholders piece compared to how much of this long-term debt is just sitting out there because of all these acquisitions, right? You know, and so that's one reason probably why this interest expense is so high, right? The people loaning them money are looking at them like they're not the most credit-worthy company, right? Because they have all this other debt, right? You're wanting more debt, right? And when you're like the fifth person they borrow money from, you ask for a lot more money, you know, as a higher interest rate, right? Because you're like, wait, I know I'm not the first person to get paid back, so I want you to pay me more money, right? So so yeah, there's a lot going on, you know, there. Let's see. They're not paying a dividend. Company K, that's the one that was, you know, doing all the mergers and acquisitions. Eli Lilly, they pay out almost 89 cents of every dollar, right? So if you're an Eli Lilly stockholder, shareholder, you're pretty happy because you get mailbox money. You just go out to the mailbox every few months and there's a check, right? From Eli Lilly. Here's your dividend. Thank you, investor. You know, so that's they're not retaining a lot of earnings, but they're such a large company. There's not that much growth opportunity. And so one of the theories that we have for the firm is, hey, if I'm your manager and I can't make you more money, I should just give you the money, right? That's one reason why we talk about them paying dividends. So those investors can go and invest that money in another firm and get a higher rate of return, right? Because if I don't have a way to grow your money, then I should just give it back to you, right? Because it's yours. And then we talk about, was it coverage ratios maybe, or? Well, like here's the quick ratio. And even though they are carrying their debt, you know, they are carrying debt, but it's not like their long-term debt, right? So when you look at their ratios, they're not, obviously Eli Lilly's in a better financial position for as far as that goes, but like their quick ratio is not nearly as bad because a lot of that is that long-term debt, which is really really high. Oh, this interest coverage, that's another piece that's hurting them. So if interest rates, you know, were to move against them, right, they're in a really bad situation because they're barely covering their interest now. In fact, they didn't turn a profit, right? And so I would argue they're probably not, you know, covering their interest, you know, but there's some other things out here that got taken off as well. But that's the situation that they're in. Like they barely have enough coming in to be able to coverage the interest that's due, right? So they've done a good job. They've grown the company, you know, they've done those things. But it looks like they may have levered that company just a little too quickly. And you know, if we were to go into a situation where the market just sort of jumps, you know, and we've seen that happen, you know, interest rates move and they could be put in a situation where they go out of business. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and do the power firm. So someone could read that for me.
I can take that one. Companies M and N are in the power generation industry. One company focuses on solar power. This includes the manufacturing and selling of power systems, as well as maintenance services for those systems. The other company owns large, mostly coal-powered, electric power generation plants in countries around the world. Most of its revenues result from power purchase agreements with the country's government that buy the power generated. Some of its U.S. assets include regulated public utilities.
All right. So the coal company is AES. They're out of Virginia. And then the solar company is First Solar. So they have two different sides of the business. So they sell solar panels to people, and then they do maintenance on those solar assemblies, right? So there's like this purchase and maintenance agreement that they do. And they also sell the well, they manufacture it and sell it, right? So yeah, so that's how they're set up. So so when you start looking at cash, again, that's another one that we look at. The solar company, you know, is holding a lot more cash. So they're being a bit more conservative. Could be younger, could be smaller, you know, could be, hey, we have a current administration that's giving us a, you know, some sort of incentive, you know, for solar. but that could go away. So let's keep some cash on hand just in case, that kind of thing. So there's lots of reasons they could be holding it. It could just be they're hoping for some sort of opportunity in the future, and they want to be able to take advantage. So as far as PP&E, right? One company has all these coal-fired power plants, right? So that's what the PP&E is. The other firm, they own some stuff, but really their business is they manufacture the system. So yeah, there's some stuff, but then they sell it and they maintain someone else's system, right? Which would be off their books, right? So they sell that, and so they don't retain that in. So this long-term debt piece, again, the big company that has coal-fired power plants and these government contracts and power purchase agreements, all that kind of stuff. They're also carrying a lot more long-term debt. This is normally what you would want to do, right? If you had any sort of big power plant somewhere, you would want to have a lot of debt that sits against that asset, right? That's kind of what we do in finances. We try to we balance our assets and our liabilities. So if you're building a bunch of power generation facilities, normally you'll build that using a lot of debt, and the debt will be retired in 30 years, when that power plant is going through its big overhaul or whatever. So yeah, so you're seeing that there. The other firm, they turn around and sell the stuff as quickly as possible. So in that case, obviously they're going to not carry a whole lot of debt, right? Because what's that debt going to be against? If you notice the debt to equity piece, again, if they're not carrying a lot of debt, then clearly they're going to end up having less debt relative to equity, right? And that's what you're seeing. So this firm, the utility firm, has a lot of debt, so there's a lot more debt to equity. The other firm does not. But if we start looking at like that interest payout or the interest coverage, right? Right, you're seeing that same situation where utility firms could be really sensitive to interest rate, right? Because of the way they've structured, for their payments to go. At dividends, right? Utility companies, if you're buying a utility, it's because you want a dividend normally, because that's safe, right? I mean, if you think about it, it's a heavily regulated industry. The state doesn't want the company to go out of business, right? So the company, is probably not going to go out of business, which is good for you as a debt holder, right? So, or even as a shareholder, it makes you feel good about it. So you're getting a dividend payout because where are they going to put the money? They're regulated, so they can't just do whatever they want to with their facilities, because the government's contract with them to provide power at certain times for certain prices and all of those things. So that's their focus. The other firm is a growth company, so they're going to not pay dividends and instead reinvest that money into these new solar, possibilities. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Okay, and then if somebody could, just go ahead and read the last one, the retail piece.
I'll go ahead and read retail. Companies O and P are retailers. One is a leading e-commerce company that sells a broad range of products, including media, books, music and videos, and electronics, which together account for 92% of revenues. 1/3 of revenues are international, and 20% of sales come from third-party sellers, i.e. sellers who transact through the company's website to sell their own products rather than those owned by the company. A growing portion of operating profit comes from the company's cloud computing business. With its desire to focus on customer satisfaction, this company has invested considerably in improving its online technologies. The other company is a leading retailer in apparel and fashion accessories for men, women, and children. The company sells mostly through its upscale brick and mortar department stores.
Okay, so you heard the cloud computing piece, right? So you can probably guess the first one is Amazon, right? Since then, obviously they've grown more, especially, as a cloud computing and things like that. But the other one is a company called Nordstrom. And so if you're not familiar, they're a very high-end fashion retailer, right? And they're famous for their extreme high levels of customer service. It's more of a very high-end, like a Macy's, but higher quality than that. So that's their niche market, right? And so as far as some of these differences, cash and short-term investments, as far as Amazon goes, really with Amazon, it's so they can buy companies, because Amazon buys companies all the time. And they're looking, if they find like a logistics company that's doing something really well, they'll just buy them just to get access to that, particular, information or whatever, or so like that's one reason why they keep so much cash, so they're always able to go and buy stuff. As far as PP&E, if you notice, the Nordstrom is much higher. Now Amazon owns, I think it's Whole Foods, right? I know it's one of those nice grocery stores. I think it's Whole Foods that they own, but yeah, so there are some, physical locations, but most of theirs are like order fulfillment centers and warehouses and that type of thing. When you're looking at Nordstrom, they have brick and mortar stores, right? And so they're going to have more in a PP&E standpoint. As far as how they finance this, or the capital structure, I should say, if you look at the liabilities, right? So current liabilities are much higher with Amazon, right? And that's because they're carrying so much in accounts payable. But part of that, when it said that they're not actually selling their own inventory, people are selling through Amazon. So Amazon receives the money and then they will pay it to the manufacturer once they get verification that's been delivered. So they're able to keep the float the few days, right? That they hold on to that, and so that shows up as this accounts payable, because this is money that they will pay out to those suppliers, right? Let's see. I think if we look at like R&D and stuff, yeah. So like R&D, Nordstrom doesn't do it, Amazon does, right? So that's like one of those things that's a little bit different. They're both retailers, but one of them is more of a tech company, right? And so they're having to pay software engineers to develop new ways of doing things, that type of thing. So as far as inventory turnover, right? If you see, even though Amazon has so much in inventory, right? If you think about all these big order fulfillment centers, these distribution centers they have, as a percentage of their sales, it's not that much, right? I mean, like it seems like it's a lot, but then we don't realize how much is flowing through Amazon, right? And so while it is a lot, the high volume of sales and this high automation means they're able to fulfill things very quickly, right? Where Nordstrom's not like that. Nordstrom is all about that boutique experience, because they have very rich clientele that like to come in and take their time and all that type of thing. So they're not getting the turnover that you would get, with, that's the disadvantage of that brick and mortar type of retailer. But yeah, and then let's just go down, let's see. The dividend payout. Right now, I don't know if Amazon has changed now. It was a zero dividend payout. They may pay one now. I have not actually checked. But they're not paying, they're a big company, not paying the dividend makes that money available for them to reinvest, right? They're paying for all this R&D and things like that. So as long as they're continuing to grow, then it makes sense for them to not pay the dividend. It makes sense to reinvest it. Excuse me. If you look at the dividend payout for P, that's the Nordstrom one. It's just a big, it's, I don't want to say big, but it's a good sized company that doesn't have a lot of growth opportunity. Right. And so what they would want to do is pay things out. Now, why are they paying out twice their earnings? In this particular case, this was like an unusual dividend. Yeah, so like, right, let's see. Yeah, because they have an extraordinary dividend that was paid out. It doesn't show up. It just looks weird. But what happened was Nordstrom used to have their own credit card, and they sold that off, right, to another company to administer all that stuff. And so when they sold it, they paid like an extra $5 a share to all the shareholders, right? And so they got this extra dividend, and so it kind of kicked it up really high. But it would have been really close if you take like half of this out, then they're almost paying every dollar out, which is about what they do, right? They try to make as much money as possible, but they don't have the growth opportunity. So the money that they make, they just pay out in dividends. And as a shareholder, you're like, that's fine. I give you my money, and then you just constantly pay me back money, right? And so it's a way for me to get an income stream off of these dividends. So if you think about it, like as we were going through this, as we're doing cases, a lot of times we'll be doing two companies, compare and contrast, and sometimes we're only going to do one. But as we're doing it, these little things that we were seeing, like if you look at beer and you look at the power companies, one case you have like the mass market, like the Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch, and the let's see, that was, what was it, beer, and then the power would just be like the coal-fired power plants, right? That's just like the everybody gets it kind of thing, versus like the niche, which with beer, that was the Sam Adams, with the power firm, that was the solar company. So the product itself can be the differentiating thing. You can differentiate the market. Like with the computers, you had, personal computers versus institutions. With the airline, we had a large carrier versus a discount airline, right? With the one we just did with Amazon, you have an online versus a brick and mortar store, right? So with each of these are certain patterns that you can kind of see that will tell you a little bit about, the asset mix, right? Like we saw with hospitality, right? Their numbers, one company owns a lot of things, the other one is doing franchises. So it's one of them's using assets and the other one's providing services, even though they're both hotels, right? You saw almost every firm, there was like some sort of difference in this debt to equity, right? Like, how much debt to equity is actually it kind of shows up really in every case, right? The cash balances, that's something that kind of shows up to show you, different financial policies. The dividend policy tells you a lot. And then when you see a combination of those things, they can tell you, are we trying to grow based on like our internal growth, what we call this organic growth, or is it that inorganic mergers and acquisitions, right? We're going to try to grow that way, so these, they're operating in the same environments. They are the same type of firm, but management makes different choices, right? And that's what we're looking at, right? But hopefully this kind of shows you, like, this is how we use that ratio analysis. So when Dr. Isaacs was teaching you all that stuff in accounting, this is why, right? Because this is how we use this kind of stuff, is to tell stories about these companies, right? And then the DuPont formula, I'm not going to ever make you like memorize things, but this is just a real handy way to think about companies. We've been using it for a long time. And so, hey, are we profitable? Are we good at using our assets, and are we leveraged, right? Like that's what the DuPont formula tells you. So this part down here, that's another thing, to just a framework to think about a company, right? Where's this difference? And so, just keep in mind, because with these, every one of these had something too that was like a little weird, right? Like some of them had negative dividends, some had dividends that were far greater than their net income. You had all this kind of weird stuff. It was kind of to point out, like, we got to be careful when we do this, because it's just a bunch of numbers, right? And sometimes something kind of weird may have happened. And if we just say, oh, well, that's just the numbers, and keep going and not think about it, we can miss another part of the story, right? And so don't think of this type of analysis as just like, hey, I'll go do this, I'll see these things, and then I know what's going on. It's more it's called the financial detective, because it's that detective type of work of, okay, we're going to get together. I'm going to put you in a room, and I'm not going to talk to you for 5 minutes and just see what you say, right? I'm just going to put something out there, just kind of see, is there something that just looks weird to me, right? I'm just going to pay attention and just let you talk, right? And that's all we're doing with these numbers, is we're just looking for things that stand out, like, that type of 50-4, and 62-22. Like, there's a story there, right? I don't know exactly what it is, and maybe it doesn't really go anywhere, but that's what this is doing, is it's telling you those little places, like, this is where you should maybe dig a little deeper. All right, so you guys feel like you understand how to do this, like, financial analysis or comparison with ratios and that type of thing? Let me rephrase it. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, now that we've covered that, I'm going to go ahead and put those other videos up. Like I said, I didn't want to do that, and then we're never going to use it. So since this went with those last videos with the financial ratios and all that, I just want to go ahead and do this. The next case, I'm going to put that one up. It's going to be like a real case, but we're going to go through that one together, and then we'll go ahead and pick which team wants to do which case for the next 4 weeks, and then that gets us out. So that's kind of my plan going forward. So just keep your eye out. I don't know if you guys are subscribed on that YouTube playlist or whatever, but just keep your eyes there. I'll make sure I do an announcement on Blackboard, but that way you'll be able to watch those videos as they go up. And this video conversation here, I'm going to put in there as well, so you guys can go back and look over this and see all the little things that we were highlighting as we were talking through it, and that kind of thing. So when you're doing your own team case, you'll be able to go back and reference it or something if you want to go look at something. So, all right. Well, do you guys have any questions for me about anything? All right. Well, let me turn that part off. Okay, now I can see all you guys. All right. Well, I'll let you guys go then. Like I said, just be on the lookout for those other videos. I'm gonna go ahead and put those up now then. And then I'll put up the next case and the spreadsheet, and then we'll talk about what cases. I'll give you guys a list of cases to choose from. I'll tell you what they're about. Because if I just say the company names, you may not even know the companies or anything else. So I'll give you the company or the case name or whatever, and then I'll put in parentheses, okay, this is an IPO, or this is about restructuring after a bankruptcy or something like that. So it gives you a sense of what this case is about, so you can focus on something that you find particularly interesting. All right, sound good? All right. Well, I'll see you guys. If you need me for anything, don't hesitate to email me. And I'm around for you, but otherwise you guys have a good night.
Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Woodruff, can I stick around for a minute?
Yeah.
Hey, so we just moved into a new facility at work, and we've got our grand opening, ribbon cutting, big to do next Thursday.
Okay.
So it is 5:30 to 7:30, and I think we're expecting a few hundred people probably.
Right. I'm going to record it.
Okay.
So that'll be okay. Who's in your group with you?
My group is Jamie, Haley, Janan, and Darren.
Okay, go ahead and email all of them.
Okay.
Let them know that you're not going to be there. You can tell them, hey, I already talked to
Okay.
Griff and everything, but let them know that you're not going to be there, and because we're going to talk about the case stuff, and that way they're going to be able to kind of talk to you too. Hey, this is what he's expecting of us and all that stuff. Sure. So as far as the other videos, those will just be on YouTube. You can watch those.
Gotcha.
So but yeah, on Thursday, what we're going to do, I haven't put up the case yet, but I'll put up a case spreadsheet, and then I'm going to go through the case. So what we've done so far, we did the Warren Buffett, which was just, hey, here's a smart guy. Here's what he does, right? That was kind of that case. Sure, and then this one was more of a, okay, here's a couple of companies. Let's see how they make decisions. Because what doing this really does, it doesn't tell you about the company as much as it tells you about the management, right? Because the management's making these decisions. Like, this is how we're going to be structured. This is how we're going to be leveraged. This is, the amount we're spending in R&D versus sales expenses, whatever, because these companies are in the same industry, right?
Sure.
But they're trying to carve out their own unique place. And so every manager is different. And so now when we're going forward, it's going to be more like John Smith has to make a decision on, this kind of
right.
They'll walk you through a particular company. So these first two look a little different because it's more to get you thinking, sort of like that first PDF I put up. This is how to read a case.
Yes.
And so like that. So these other cases are going to look more like what you think of with a case, like California Pizza Kitchen is thinking of expanding, and that
gotcha
thing. So just make sure you talk to them, and then also make sure you go back and you watch the lecture video, because kind of like in this one, I know maybe felt a little excruciating sometimes when I was through these lines.
I've got my notes, man.
I was trying to show you how these things connect, and it's like, well, this is high, but also this is high, and if they're both high, maybe it means this, right?
Sure.
It's kind of like those people that watch all those murder mysteries, and then suddenly they're able to like notice,
pick it apart,
little things, right? So that's what we want to be able to do with our financial analysis, is to say, hey, something doesn't look quite the same. And it's not bad necessarily; it could be brilliant, right? But it's different,
It's how they're differentiating themselves.
Yeah. And so that's all we're looking for, is like, hey, where's a good starting point?
Sure.
That's what we can do, is say, hey, their R&D has dropped off to zero for the last 3 years. Is this a new a way forward. Why did they decide, look, it's not worth spending money there. We're better off just buying
Acquiring.
other companies, or
Sure.
or whatever. So yeah, that's why we went through this stuff. So it's going to look a little bit different. I'm trying to like preface that appropriately for you.
Sure.
So when you go and watch the video, you're just like, wait, how many did I miss?
Yeah.
Because it is going to look a bit different.
Okay. No, that's good. I appreciate you, and I'm enjoying this class. I feel like
Good. We're trying to make it as hands-on as possible and everything.
Sure.
It's just, without being able to do it in class, it's just really different, and so
It's definitely different. Yeah.
so
I do like the lectures online and not, that breaks it up a lot easier than sit for 3 hours, 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Yeah, I'd say for you more than anybody. Yeah.
Right. Well, unfortunately, this is my teaching day because Tuesday, Thursdays are normally when my classes are, and so this was a Thursday night, and so it's just like, okay. So I'm here from like 8 a.m. until about 8 or 9 p.m. So
yeah,
I'm working those farmer hours on one. So.
I'm used to them too. I do that. I'm doing that several times this week, so I get it.
Yeah.
So, well, Dr. Woodruff, I appreciate you, man.
Sure thing.
So I will not be there next week unless it runs over. I'll log them when I can.
I don't know if we're going to go that long, and I won't necessarily rush it. I mean, I understand you guys got to do the meet and greet and all that.
Yeah.
So
Kiss babies, shake hands.
Right. I understand all that. So yeah, just make sure you catch up, and then also make sure you stay in touch with your group.
Absolutely.
There to be an issue there. So
absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, sir. All right, appreciate it.